Welcome to our newly revamped AI Would Agree. Many thanks to marketing team for their hand in helping me get this looking as though it's actual, professional, and real. It's something I've struggled to do by myself, not a creative person. Welcome to the show, everybody, for our next episode of AI Would Agree, 100%. Wherever you are in the world, we are going to be live. We are live now. So if you are watching the show as we put it out, please do feel free to ask your questions in the comments. We will get round to answering as many as we possibly can. And thank you for all your kind words of support in the background. It means a lot to me and the guests of the show. This week, I bring to you Oliver Catt, very well known face from the other side of the world with a familiar accent for us in the UK. Ollie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me. But I thought I'd bring it local with the background for you.
Yeah, I like it. You missing home?
No. I left the UK 5 years ago now. I've been back briefly 3 years ago, and that was only for work. Other than that, I have got no plans as yet. Touch wood to come home.
Fantastic. And you're living out in Grenada, right?
Yep, down in the south of the Caribbean. Just that's where it's based. That's where it's at. It's been an interesting 5 years, I can tell you that much.
Awesome. So for those of us who are watching the show who maybe don't already know who you are, Ollie, like, do you want to give us a brief introduction, who you are, how you got where you are, what do you do? There's a lot to cover there, yeah, right? So
you were unpacking.
How did you end up in Grenada?
So how did I end up here? Okay, so in a nutshell, worked in contact centers for close to 20 years now, 15, 20, I don't even know, somewhere in that ballpark. And then both my wife and I were headhunted by Sandals. And we ended up over here. They brought us over here. They kind of emigrated us over to the Caribbean. We started working for them. And then around COVID time, I took redundancy. I'd always wanted to set up my own consultancy business, specifically in the contact center industry. And here we are, 2.5 years later. Wow. Still feel I've not said that for a while. But yeah, 2.5 years down the pike. Now running my own training consultancy and outsourcing consultancy for contact centers around the world. And I've been doing that ever since 2020. So it's been an interesting ride. My wife still works for the company, which is why we're still here, thankfully. However, we don't plan to leave just yet or for the foreseeable, if that answers your question in a nutshell.
It does. Do you know, that's probably the shortest response to that question. I've had some people way past the 15-minute mark, and I'm like, well, I was just offering for a quick intro, guys. Yeah, so it's always interesting where people go when I leave that a little bit open. Quick question then. Did you intend to get into contact centers?
No, not at all. Truth be told, I actually wrote a post about this a couple of weeks ago. I was embarrassed. I came from an industry that some people may find out about. No, it's nothing dodgy, trust me. That I really love doing. Basically working in entertainment at holiday resorts around the world, doing bits and pieces like that. And I managed a lot of that functionality. And then it was kind of like, well, I need to come back, find a proper job. What am I going to do? And I just found a contact center job. Actually, it was up north in Preston, working for TalkTalk. And I didn't tell anybody about it. I was really embarrassed about coming out of what I was doing and going into that world. Because essentially, as I kind of use the term now, it's contact centers are the factory of our time. That's essentially what they are. And I went in there headstrong. I went straight into sales, dove straight in. I'd done sales for retail. If we go back to high street days like Dixon's back in the day, when they were on the high street, which is now what, Curry's, PC World, I don't know, something like that. I jumped into retentions for TalkTalk, and I loved it, and I think I did very well at it. I made quite a lot of money at it. I was a good sales agent on the phone. I did that for a while. And I kind of found a passion very quickly for training. it took some time because I really enjoyed being on the phone. So one of those things within contact centers where you go in for a job, you go in for something, you think there's a career path there for you in X. And for me, it was on the phones. And whilst I was in training, I really enjoyed the training. Like everybody says, oh, how do you become a trainer? How do you become a trainer? And all the trainers just laugh it off and brush it off. Go, yeah, okay. You're seeing the fun stuff. You're not seeing the hard work that goes into being a trainer. And so I just thought, you know what, I'll do the standard route. I'll go from agent to team leader to supervisor to operations, blah, 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 up the chain and work my way up that way. I think I covered a team leader role for my boss for like a week. And I was like, I'm not doing that again. And then one of my other bosses at the time turned around to me and said, well, have you thought about doing training? I was like, well, funny enough. And that's kind of how the training branch of contact centers came along. Again, a condensed, very short story of what happened. But yes, to answer your question, no, I didn't want to work in call centers. I fell into call centers. I was embarrassed to work in call centers. But now that is the company, that is the industry, that is the foundations of my career. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now and enjoy. I wouldn't even be here in, ignore the background, the Caribbean, had I had not fallen into the contact center industry.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation, right? Like, I spoke with John Devlin from Ascensos a couple of weeks back, and it was one of the conversation points that he very much feels very passionately about and brought up was that a lot of people feel that exact same way about contact centers. It's almost looked down on, certainly in this part of the world, in the UK, and I guess in North America as well, in terms of, a lot of people see it as a job to do to pass some time. Nobody ever really intends to get into that job, but actually there's a really rich, thriving career path to be had. And it's not, it shouldn't have the stigma that it probably does carry. And it's the same with things like retail, right? Like people talk about, oh, I'll go and stack some shelves. Right? It's the same thing. Like if those people didn't stack the shelves, like what we're going to eat?
That's it.
It's a really, really important role. We need to very much stop looking down on those sorts of roles, but specifically around contact centers, I think there's a huge career opportunity for anybody to be able to find what they want to do there.
And do you know what? It's one of those big, as you say, it's a stigma that people don't associate themselves with. I don't want to go work in a call center. I remember when I'm going back probably to late 90s. If anybody can remember Woolwich, the bank, they opened a contact center above one of their branches where I lived in my hometown. And people I knew went to work there. And I was like, working in a contact center, really? Ugh. Ugh. I look back now and I feel really bad for that because it's what's made me who I am today. And it is one of those things that you either love it or you hate it. And you're either going to sink or you're going to swim. People think that they can come in there, sit on the phones and collect a paycheck. It's not like that. Unless you work hard, unless you work your socks off, you're never going to get anywhere and you're going to stay on the phones. I know people that have been on the phones because they enjoy it for 20 years. I know people that have worked their way up on every step of the career ladder for the last 20 years because they want to better themselves at what they do. An interesting fact that I recently found on Google, only really because I wanted to target, and one of my target markets for my own personal sales conversions at the moment is contact centers in the US. And I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but I believe there's 60 something thousand call centers that are in the US live and active right now. And the definition of that is more than 10 active heads. Didn't know that. Didn't know there was 66,000 in the US.
The interesting thing is, I'll bet that a lot of those people that run those 10 people to 100 people contact centers don't even call it a contact center or appreciate that it is a contact center. It's just a bunch of people that we've got answering the phones.
That's a fair point. Didn't even think of it like that. That's a very fair point.
Yeah, trust me. We share a common prospective client persona, Ollie, and there's a lot of people out there. I go, have you got a contact center? And they go, no, we haven't got a contact center. And I go, oh, okay, so do you have a customer service team? I go, yeah, I've got like 150 people. Office over there. Okay. Have you got any salespeople? You haven't got like another 100 other people over there to do outbound sales. Right, got a contact center. Got some news for you. You've got a contact center. You're a contact center manager. You didn't know it. Um,
But do you know what the irony behind that? The last company I worked for in the UK didn't see themselves as a call center because they weren't. They were a sole product owner. They were a business. They were essentially a sales and marketing company with a contact center attached to them. That's how it was. I mean, they had a product. They had all the in-house teams. They had everybody and everything that you needed. However, they had a call center attached to that business, but they weren't a call center.
100%. 100%. Quick comment from Scott. Hi Scott. Good to see you watching, mate. And he's right. Like nobody grows up saying, I want to answer calls and answer customers' questions. Well, I think that's fair. Like I can understand why that would never be the case.
Yep.
Scott said he wants to be a garbage man at 5. Like, do you know what? I think my 4-year-old son would agree with that. He's torn between being an astronaut and a bin man. Like it's going to be UK. He's a bin man, right? Like, and like I'm not going to stop him doing either. If he wants to do one, he wants to do the other. They're both great aspirational things to grow up being. But I think I get your point, Scott. It's like nobody ever grows up, and I think there are elements of a job that speak to people far beyond what the role actually is. And this is a conversation I have a lot with a lot of people about finding their why. Like people think your ideal job's about. I'm going to hide that question because it's like it's cut my face off. There's a lot of people out there think that your ideal job is this highly paid job that you do 5 hours a week and you earn millions of pounds a year doing it, right? And that's like, pardon my French, everybody, that's crap.
That's what I do every week, Paul.
What an ideal job, like where you found your why is recognizing that, there's elements of my job I don't really enjoy doing, but actually the bit that I really get a kick out of speaks to me as a person.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not answering the customer's questions, but maybe it is resolving their problem and helping take some of the pressure off their shoulders and getting them to a point where they now understand what's going on and they can deal with, if you're talking about a debt bill, for example, getting to a point where they fully understand what that debt bill entails, why they've got it, and they're satisfied that they either need to pay it or that some of it's wrong and you're going to do your best to sort that out for them. That moment where you've made that difference to somebody's life might be why you enjoy doing the job. And I think that's something that you can definitely get bags and bags of that doing contact centers, because there's so many different aspects to the role.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And the fact is, in my opinion, when it comes to contact centers, is you may hire somebody to do something, but that's not their perfect fit. That's not their perfect job. There is always something for somebody within the organization of whatever it might be or what they're interested in. They may come in customer service, but realize they're actually really good at closing. They're really good at upselling or cross-selling. You don't know. And to go back to what Scott was saying is nobody knows what they want to do at that age. They have an idea, they have an aspiration of what they want to go to, but we fall into these jobs. We fall into doing what we do, and we find a passion for it. We find a love for it because we're good at what we do. And we find something that we excel at and we can really, truly make a difference. And that in a nutshell is why I fell into training within contact centers, because for me, there was nothing more exciting about seeing people learn and seeing people grow and seeing people develop. And I think that was what excited me initially about the whole team leader role. I started to take that first step into the, that management organizational structure, because I was able to coach, I was able to manage, but then I found myself, as any call center manager, supervisor, or leader listening to this would agree with, that you spend 80% of your day dealing with crap rather than coaching and developing and engaging people. And I think that made me realize that as a trainer, as a coach, as somebody in the development team could really make that difference, could really take that leap. And I think that's why I stepped into that kind of path. And very quickly that I was very lucky, should I say, to get roles up the ladder in that job, in that industry within training. But for me, again, didn't want to do it. Didn't want to go after it. wasn't something I aspired to be. It was something that I fell in love with very quickly. And just very quickly, if my dogs go nuts, talking of bin men, it's because the bin men are going past. Just putting that caveat in there right now.
So, I guess we kind of met around a joint networking conversation where you were kind of telling me about your passion for sales and sales training in particular. And I was kind of discussing how, a lot of what the modular analytics company does can be applicable and
Yeah.
how it can help enable people who are in those sorts of roles. I think it became very clear to me that you're super passionate about using technology to get the best out of people, right?
100%. 100%. So many people are against it because it feels like you're taking the human element away from doing their job. You're putting a robot in instead of having a person do it. But I don't think people realize is that you're actually adding an additional tool to somebody's skill set. These tools should never be used to replace somebody's job. That's not what they're there to do. QA, TMAC, Unison, right? I look at QA from the call center doing the human part of what you offer. Um, I know for a fact and categorically that the amount of calls listened to in a contact center range between 0.01% and 1-2%. I think we've discussed this before, and those numbers are nothing because you're only seeing a very small snippet of your business. And the last company I worked for, they had a criteria of the calls they listened to. It needed between this length and this length, and they had to be between this and this and this agent and this agent and this team and this. So you then build a huge QA team, especially when you've got, 4, 5, 600,000 people on the phones. You've got a big QA team to go through that, but you're still only listening to this and you don't understand the issues you're getting. So these 30-second calls or 1-minute length calls that come through that are the problem calls, that are the reason why your call drivers are so high, you're not listening to. So you're not
Yeah.
building trends. You're not looking at the reporting. You're not building the analytics out of it. So what are you doing? And the answer is nothing. You're missing a big chunk of the pie, which is why I agree. Tech stack, e-learning systems, speech analytics systems, QA systems, coaching tools, which basically is TMAC in a nutshell without the e-learning piece, but essentially it is. For me, you would be silly not to put something like this at a good cost because all of a sudden now you're analyzing 100% of your calls. Now, bearing in mind, you may only still be listening to your 1% of calls, but your system's listening to 100%. So that's building your reports. It's building your training. And then for me as a trainer, to get a report that says, hey, the sales team, these are the errors, these are the trends, go and fix it. That would give me a lifetime of work to go and do.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, people overlook that because they don't see the benefit.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, yes, there's a cost involved. I mean, don't get me wrong, we'd all love to put it in if it was free. Everybody would. But think of the money you could generate off of fixing the errors. Think of the return on investment. I mean, look, I know we've had this conversation, but for example, what is your ROI on putting something like TMAC into a business for a call center that you can categorically prove this is what you're going to make back, this is what you're going to give back? That's what I think the essentials is when it comes to something like this.
Yeah. I think the fascinating side of my job is when we talk to people, they've generally got an idea when I'm at the point where I'm having a conversation with them, they've got an idea as to what they want to find. They've already committed that they want some sort of analytics, or they might have committed in their mind, if not on actual, in terms of strategy meetings. And they tell me about some of the ideas that they want to go with as to what they want to prove or disprove. And it's great. But it's always fun having that conversation, knowing that there's an absolute pile of stuff that they'll never be able to guess at because there's absolutely no way of them even realizing it exists
Yep.
without the analytics that sit behind it. But I think for me, if you go back to the QA example, just the chance for rebuttals from the agents, we're going to sit down, we're going to listen to this call. Like, okay, brilliant. Oh, you did this really badly. Yeah, but I don't normally do that. Wow, okay. Well, yeah, maybe it's a one-off conversation then. And then you listen to another call, and yeah, there will be elements that you can see. Like I've been that agent, I've been that team leader, right? You sat there and go, yeah, but there's a common theme here. right? There's something running through what you're doing that you're not quite hitting it on the head. You can
Yep.
see that from the few calls that you do QA. But to your point, like imagine if you could just run through all the complaints for that advisor, or you could run through all the bits where the agent customers come off and being really happy with how the
Yep.
conversation went.
The one line that gets me every time is when you sit down and you coach somebody, or you pull somebody up for doing something they didn't do right, or something they need to change, and they turn around and go, "Wasn't trained that." The go-to line. It's that
Yeah.
go-to line, because all of a sudden, "Wasn't trained that" means, "Up, let's pull the training team in." The amount of times I've been pulled in, "Oh, you didn't train this person on this." "Oh, I did. I've even got a piece of paper to say they signed to complete that module." Right?
No,
The
no,
fact is, with something like speech analytics in place, with something like every call recorded, you go through, you find the same trend, but it only appears in one other call. So hang on a minute. So these other 1,000 people seem to be answering this query perfectly fine, but you weren't trained it. Okay.
tell you a really, really interesting story on that. So, obviously, my background's in retail, right? So we used to do a lot of stock takes in stores, a lot stock
Yeah.
takes, and obviously we had an alcohol section. It became bottles of wine, cases of wine. Some of them were quite expensive, well, relatively expensive. It was discount retail, so nothing above the 15 quid mark usually. But we've got one of my deputy managers was counting the boxes, and he completely miscounted how many bottles of wine there were. There's only like 2.5 cases, and he completely miscounted it. And the area manager pulled him up. He went, "This count's completely wrong. Why?" This is a deputy manager who's on a substantial pay packet. Um, and his response was, "Oh, nobody taught me how to count the wine." and literally, nobody in that aisle could speak for about 10 minutes because there's just tears running down my face. Like,
Brilliant.
get in the office, please. We'll have this conversation in private then.
These are the excuses that people use. It honestly, it infuriates me when people go, "I don't know, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that." Do you know what? Hands down, there are people that are not aware of things. There are people that, you don't know if you don't know. But come on, don't play it just because you were not paying attention in training, or you've been caught out because you've done something wrong. It just, it's one of those things that winds me up. But like I say,
A lot of
kind of,
people are afraid to ask the hard questions of themselves.
yeah,
I think that's what it boils down to, and I guess that's where you come in as a sales trainer or a trainer in general to kind of
yep.
help them understand that process. I mean, so talk me through about what an engagement for you looks like. What makes you stand out from the crowd, Ollie?
Do you know what? There are a lot of people out there that do what I do. Um, and there's a lot of competition in my industry. There is a lot of people out there trying to do the same thing, that have worked in call centers and wanted to be a consultant or wanted to be a sales coach and things like that. I think where I come from and what I do is my background in contact centers. That's what I utilize, rather than being working in sales, delivering SaaS, or delivering this, door to door or whatever. My specific niche is contact centers. That's where I go. That's what I do. That's what I've bred in and out. So I understand the operations. I understand how they work. I understand what they deliver and what they need to push forward, and ultimately to see an ROI for the work that I go in there and do. Whereas if you just bring somebody in who does sales, you know, these
Yeah.
people may be doing sales in a very varied approach across the industry. I try and build my niche completely around contact centers, which is why I've now kind of expanded my offering. Um, Contact center outsourcing. I found over the last kind of everything that I do now, I don't know how it's happened. It's just literally fallen back into contact centers. Um, so I found myself in the past year as a middleman for brokering outsourcing, or people finding outsource partners. So I now work with about 45 BPOs around the world, going from India, Malaysia, all the way through to South Africa, Caribbean, South America, Central America. Um, And basically, I marry a lot of people up depending on their requirements. Again, contact center. But then here's the other benefit is I also offer the training that goes with that and the managed services that goes with that as well. So again, training related. The consultancy that I offer when it comes to management organizations, again, has fallen into contact center world. And then obviously my training, I specifically work with call centers. If people approach me to do something out of that, I'll consider it. I'll look at it. But again, if you're not a contact center, it's not on my remit, should I say?
It's an interesting story. And you know what? I think now that I've spent, obviously I've spent the last 2 years immersed in contact centers from where I was previously in just retail specifically. And it's a fascinating industry in that everything just goes round and round and round between everybody that's on there. And it's always interesting to see how it's kind of like the butterfly effect, right? Like you see a small ripple on one side of the pond, and then you see the same things happening 3 weeks, 4 weeks later on the other side of the pond.
Yep.
I guess one of the things, obviously we're coming up to the half-hour mark, so I'll try and keep these sessions to kind of within the 30 minutes. What's some of the takeaways that you've learned the hard way through your sales training, your sales leadership that businesses can kind of take and implement without any real substantial change to what they're doing? What are the key basics that they're usually missing that can return some of that ROI for them if they could change it this week?
What from my perspective of what I deliver, me, there's one really that stands out more than anything else in the world, and that's having senior leadership involved in the entire process. There are companies that I've worked with where they want me to come in and train the leaders. They want me to train the sales managers, the supervisors on how to coach and how to lead a sales team, how to coach and lead a service team. The supervisors go in, the managers go in, to the point where we even roll out some of this training to the agents on the front line as well. So they're aware of it because we want them to step up. These are the next foundation of people. This is your succession planning, which is a big thing to do, which again, a lot of people don't do. However, if your senior management, the people that are involved in setting this training up, coming to me in the first place or talking to me about setting this up, are not involved in the process, there is no point doing it. Because I have gone in, I have done my thing, which I hate doing. You know, no one wants to do a tick box exercise. You want to go in, you want to make change. And essentially I go in there and do that. And the problem that you face right then and there is that when you step away, management forget it even happened. The leadership team forget what you've even done because they've seen it on a bit of paper. They haven't been to your training. So where you've told your sales managers to hold your team accountable, have one-to-ones with them, do sales meetings with them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, they're not getting it from their superiors. They're not getting it from their managers. So what happens is if that's not being reinforced, if that's not being embedded at the top down, then all of that falls away. And I've had some of these people reach out to me and say, hey, look, all of these one-to-ones that I was doing have stopped being done because my manager has stopped having one-to-ones with me. He doesn't hold me accountable. So therefore I don't hold myself accountable. And I actually got brought back to do another session. And I said, why are you guys allowing your team to get away with murder? And their response as a group was, because we are allowed to. We are allowed to get away with murder. Therefore, our teams do.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the biggest fundamental that I would say. I'm working with a client at the minute. I actually don't start with them until August. But this is what I love. The first 5 days of training where I'm training their entire leadership team. The first 5 days is with the senior directors and owners of the business, going through and training them on exactly what I'm training their subordinates. That is incredible. That is just insane. I love that. And I'm spending 5 days with them across 2 weeks to make sure that they understand, they have go through it, and that what I'm about to then impart on their teams, they will continue to do. And then I also have follow-ups with them every month to hold them accountable. That is just, that's my love. That's my passion.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I've said this before in terms of even just regular coaching, performance feedback, one-to-ones, that sort of thing. Like it gets done where it gets done well, it gets done from the top down.
Mhm.
And there's somebody holding the senior leadership publicly. Maybe not the content of those conversations, but the fact that it's happening is public knowledge. Today, the director is having a coaching conversation, they're having performance feedback discussions with, and it's probably an outside party, right? Because like there's not many people holding those guys accountable.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact that the people down on the front lines see those sorts of things happening means that they're much more bought into their own personal feedback, their own performance feedback, their own coaching sessions. And I think it's really important that that's a culture for the business, not
Yeah.
just something that's done at the coal face, if you like. You can tell I'm from a pit village area. It's not just something that's done at the coal face; it's something that's believed in through the business. And I think if you live and breathe something like that, you can see that it's important, and it does. What gets measured gets done.
Yep. Yep. 100%. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Absolutely,
Simple as.
absolutely. Ollie, it's been a genuine pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks very much for coming along.
Same to
Um,
you. Thank you for having me.
Hopefully everybody who's been watching the show has got some takeaways from that, and it's something to go away and consider over the next couple of weeks as they think about how their own organization deals with these sorts of things. But yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch, obviously you can see Ollie's very swish LinkedIn logo in the bottom corner there. If you want to connect with either of us, you want to give us a shout out, you want to drop us a line, please feel free. Our contact details are on LinkedIn. Be good to chat with anybody who's been intrigued by today's conversation. And that's this. That's us for this week. Next week, I've got Martin Anderson from Lemon BPO Outsourcing. Another interesting conversation for everybody. So I'll see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. And Ollie, I'll let you start your day properly now because it's what 10 o'clock.
10:30, mate. 10:30. I got a busy day ahead, but also we've got to catch up tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
Absolutely. All right. See you guys later. Thanks for joining the show. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.